Lately death's been getting ever so close. Been feeling spirits while I'm driving, I should get me a ghost.
I was known as Reggie's man. Scotch Ian Barry was known as Ronnie's man. The twins themselves would never like go on an organised robbery or a blagging or anything like that. They considered that the work of jailbirds, in their own words. But as soon as they heard of somebody who had it off, their first concern was, did they know anyone on the team? If they do, then they would go in for their whack, as it was known, their share. If he says, I'm not going to give you any money, you don't jump all over him. You come back and you say he's not going to pay. Now, that would be a different mission. Go and get 3 or 4 guys and go and sit on his house or a pub or a club where he drinks and give him a talking to, you know. Send him to the hospital for a couple of days and then talk to him again. That was everyday firm work.
To take the heat off their activities as criminal overlords, the Krays maintained an elaborate facade of public relations.
They were very conscious of the public image. They were. They worked a lot on it. And so what they would do is hire or use one of their own clubs and let it be known that they were organising a charity night. They didn't put their hands in their pockets and say, oh, look at this, I'm shocked about the children's unit has got no scanner or whatever. I'm going to put this money in. No, they would get other people to give it to them. Then they would hand it over, the cameras and whatever, and take the glory from it.
News of these up-and-coming charitable sportsmen was by now hitting Fleet Street. But to some crime reporters, the story didn't quite add up. Norman Lucas of the Sunday Mirror sought to win the Krays' confidence in search of the truth. He found the twins at their club, the Double R.
There was a constant flow of villains in and out, and they would stand at the other end of the bar and there would be whispered conversations, and then Reggie would say, oh, wait a minute, and he'd detach himself and go along the other end of the bar and have whispered conversations with these various people. It was then that I began to get my first suspicions that the Krays weren't what they were pretending to be, very, very honest chaps who were working for charities.
Norman Lucas nursed his suspicions about the Krays, but many patrons of the Double R saw nothing in the twins' conduct to disturb them.
Ronnie and Reggie were always the customer side of the bar with the customers. They were just socialising the whole time. You were never aware of any business going on whatsoever. They were just in the company all the time.
As we always said, if you want to be treated like a lady, you'd be speaking to a villain. I've been invited to lots of Chelsea parties with Hooray Henrys. I've heard language that I would never, ever hear in the East End.
Say they used to come to the Astor. You could feel a certain atmosphere. The Kray twins had arrived. That was the atmosphere that people got. I don't think it was fear. It was just, I suppose if the Queen was to walk in, every time I said, look, is the Queen there? There would, a feeling would arise.
This royal progress might have continued unchecked but for Ronnie's recurring bouts of mental instability. In 1958, he was committed to a mental hospital after attacking a man with a bayonet. Reggie Kray invited Norman Lucas to accompany him on a visit.
Reggie went in to this mental hospital, and I thought Reggie came out, and we drove off in a bit of a hurry, I must say. I mean, I was being driven, I wasn't. I was in their car, and so I turned round to Reggie like an idiot and said, how was Ronnie? And he said, well, I'm bloody Ronnie. He said, Reggie's in there now. And I thought, Jesus, what have I got myself into? I said, but you mean you're now an escaper? And he said, well, I'm not really, am I? He said, they shouldn't have put me in there in the first place. I'm perfectly sane. Why should they do that? And I thought, well, now where the hell does this put me? I mean, I'm just a newspaper man.
The switch pulled off, Reggie walked free. But Ronnie was now a fugitive and Lucas perhaps an accomplice. With Reggie at his elbow, Lucas called on contacts at the Home Office to negotiate a surrender deal for Ronnie with no penalties attached.
And I came off the phone and Reggie said, I wouldn't have bloody believed it if I hadn't been standing in the phone box. He said, what's he saying, this man in the Home Office? I said, well, you heard. I said, if Ronnie will give himself up now or tomorrow morning, he will go back there, but he won't necessarily stay there. And Reggie said, well, that's bloody marvellous. He said, how is it you know such high-powered people at the Home Office? Now, all part of the job, Reggie, all part of the job.
The job Lucas was really doing was penetrating the Krays empire in order to expose them. It wasn't easy, but following Ronnie's release, the police were having even less success.
It was always difficult to try to mount an action against the Krays if you worked in the East End. I mean, the story always was that whenever there was a serious crime in the East End, it was down to the Krays.
On 2 occasions I was approached by individuals, one of whom had a small club, the other had a small business making perfume for these suitcase sellers in Oxford Street, both of whom were threatened by the Krays to pay their rent, as they called it, and if they didn't, they got beaten up. And in fact, the chappie with the poor perfume, he got his place burnt down. And the answer is yes, they got there by fear and the lack of evidence.
In July 1964, Scotland Yard set up a special squad to investigate the Krays rackets. But even after Nipper Read had taken the twins into custody, key witnesses mysteriously withdrew their evidence, including one woman who had begged him to free her from the Krays.
When we said that we were taking these people away, they were going to be arrested, she fell down on her knees and grasped my legs in her arms and said, thank God, you've saved my life. And I said, we'll come later and take a statement from you, thinking that the next day would suffice. But the next day, of course, as happened in those days, we'd arrested the Krays at 1 o'clock in the morning. They were charged and they appeared at court the next day. On that day, when they appeared at Old Street Magistrates Court, this lady, now resplendent in furs and high-heeled shoes, was there, all very nicely dressed, and saying, Mr. Read, I'd like to stand bail for my good friends, the Kray twins.
And so Read's first bid to jail the Krays collapsed. With Ronnie and Reggie back on the streets, they seemed invincible. But crime reporter Norman Lucas had hit on a sensational story. Lord Boothby, a leading member of the House of Lords, had been caught up in a homosexual relationship with Ronnie Kray.
Ronnie didn't hide the fact that he was a homosexual. No. He liked young boys, young men. There were writers, there were the politicians, like the famous ones like Boothby, Dryburgh, and a few others.